Erika, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean. It's good to be with you.
All right. It's great to be with you. Wow, how timely. I want to talk about education and Linda McMahon and all of the issues that you've been a champion of. But obviously, the big news off the top is your husband announcing for governor and Donald Trump getting right behind him. How huge is that for you guys?
Oh, and indeed huge, right? As Donald Trump would say. We saw last week, just before we were arriving at CPAC, actually, the tweet came out from Donald Trump with his complete and total endorsement of my husband. I've been in Florida my whole life. Byron came in college, which is where we met. And we've been serving our communities, serving our state for our entire adult lives. So it's really exciting for us to have this opportunity now to perhaps serve the state at the highest level. I couldn't be more proud of him and really thankful to Donald Trump for his support.
I mean, I got to say, if you think about the last time he did this, right? Adam Putnam, a longtime Florida politician. I've known Adam through his days in Congress. Then he was statewide agriculture secretary, and I think sort of had the plan to just ascend to the governorship until Donald Trump put his complete and total endorsement behind a guy named Ron DeSantis. That shook up the race there pretty big. Do you guys think that on the Republican side, the field is now clear?
Well, we'll see, right? That doesn't always mean that everyone is going to step aside, but my husband has worked so hard to serve the people of Florida, to serve in Congress. And certainly the president's weight holds a lot of weight in Florida, regardless of who anyone else might jump in the race. So I think that he has a great advantage having Trump's support, but he's not going to work any less hard to make sure that he earns the votes of our fellow citizens.
Yeah. Are you, let me just ask you this, and then I want to move on to education and kind of what's going on there. Are you guys, what is your relationship with the DeSantis family, both Mrs. Casey DeSantis, who had been pondering a run, and the current governor? I know that at one point, you guys had been relatively close. He's appointed you to lead some education efforts. Or do you still maintain a cordial relationship? Do you guys talk?
As far as I'm concerned, I'm very supportive of the governor and first lady and the work that they have done in our state. I know my husband, even in his announcement last night, praised the governor's work in Florida and what he's done to make Florida great. So we just want to continue that legacy. There's no hard feelings on our side. Obviously, Byron and I supported Donald Trump for president in the primary and not Ron DeSantis. Turns out that was a great decision since Donald Trump did an incredible job. But certainly no hard feelings on our side. We'll see what happens.
That's good. I kind of was a little disappointed to see the governor take a shot at your husband about not being in the fight, something to that effect, which I thought was both unnecessary and kind of untrue.
Well, it's definitely untrue. My husband served in the state house for 4 years, and he actually ran the first bill in the country that would allow parents and community members access to instructional materials so that we could find out the kind of woke indoctrination that was actually in those materials in the schools. So to say that he wasn't in the fight, he actually started the fight, right? When he was in the legislature. He also was the one who sponsored HB1, which was the Hope Scholarship Program, which was at the time the largest expansion of funding for parental school choice in our state. So he certainly has done a lot in helping to advance the same things that are important to the DeSantis's, and that Ron DeSantis as governor has been able to continue that fight. Again, we appreciate everything that he's done for Florida, his leadership during COVID, certainly. And I think that my husband, having a even more conservative record in Congress than Ron DeSantis did as a congressman is going to just continue those wins.
Yeah. I mean, there's no one who questions your husband's conservatism or his support of Donald Trump or the America First agenda. I think that's really not in dispute. You, as chair of the AFPI Florida chapter, as well as the Center for Education Opportunity, have been able to work closely with Linda McMahon, who's the overall chairman of AFPI for the last several years. You guys laid out a lot of plans for education, but I just want to start with her as a person. President Trump tapped her to lead the Department of Education. You know her. Why is she the best person to lead the Department of Education?
I do. I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time with Linda McMahon over the past several weeks and months, and just even more respect her executive experience that she brings to the table for the department to effectuate what Donald Trump promised the American people, which was to shut down the department and to take the power, put it in the hands of the states and parents. The Department of Education doesn't educate a single child, but it does it is a behemoth that does a lot of things, and it needs an executive to come in there, evaluate where these things can go if they are to continue. What are the results supposed to look like for the return on investment for our tax dollars, and then be a part of leading the breakdown of the department so that it will ultimately benefit the students at the classroom level. Unfortunately, we're paying for multiple levels of bureaucracy, both at the federal and state level, before it ever benefits a single student. I think Linda McMahon definitely has that executive expertise to make that happen.
So you're in a very unique position because you've been a champion of a lot of these issues. You've worked with Linda. Your husband's a member of Congress. You will be first lady. And if you could sort of say right now, if Linda called you and said, hey, Erika, you've been at the forefront of these issues. You're going to be, obviously, I don't mean to be presumptuous, but when you're first lady, I think you'll obviously, this is an issue you've been passionate about for a long time. So I assume you would champion it again as first lady of Florida. If she said to you, Erika, tell me, in a crystal ball, if we could look 4 years from now, what should the Department of Education look like in 40 years from now at the end of Donald Trump's term? And what would you like to see it do vis-a-vis a state like Florida in terms of support? None at all? How should it look?
Well, I have actually been advocating for the past 10 years for the Federal Department of Education to go away. So I have a lot of experience with thinking about what it should look like, in that it should be non-existent in 4 years. I hope President Trump gets his way and Congress will be cooperative with that. Now, there are some things that the department does now that should live on, like the Office of Civil Rights, which can go under the Justice Department, for example. Any student loan portfolio that might remain should be in Treasury, but I don't think that the federal government should be involved in student loans. That's a job for the private sector. And it's actually one of the main reasons that college going is so inflated, the cost of universities. So that's just two examples of things that can be moved off the plate of the department. And then the last one that I think is important is the research that's done in terms of collecting data, like the National Report Card, that many of our friends in the education reform movement are using that information in order to make improvements. But again, that can go into the department that handles the census to just collect that data. Everything else that the department does is just passing around money and pushing papers, and should just be eliminated completely.
So in an Erika Donalds perfect world, 4 years from now, some of those key responsibilities that you just enumerated should be taken over by other departments, but the department as a whole should cease to exist. Is that fair?
That would be my preference. Now, it's going to be difficult because there are a lot of funds that are passing through the department for students with disabilities and low-income students. And what we might end up seeing is that those monies still make it to benefit those students. I would love to see that parent directed. So if you're a parent of a student with disabilities, your student may be getting, the district may be getting about $10,000 to $15,000 from the federal government to help provide services for that student. Parents that I talk to don't think that their students are really getting the benefit. They want to see those dollars in an account that they control, like an education scholarship account, where they can go out and get the services that they think their student needs. That would be an ideal way to distribute those funds if those funds are going to continue.
So, and then look at it from the Florida perspective. I'm just obviously because that's where you guys are, but whether it's Florida or any other state, what should the relationship between the state and the federal government be with respect to education? Should it just be doling out funds? Should it just, how would that work? Is it get rid of everything, shove it to the states, let them manage it? Or should there be some standards that the federal government sets that the state then executes on?
Well, that's what the situation has been thus far, right? The federal government has been passing out money to the states and supposedly upholding standards for those funds. However, with waivers and with the poor performance that the states have had academically, there has not been a return on the investment made by the federal government. And so I don't think that system is working, but the ultimate accountability is actually to the parents. So if that money is in the hands of the parents have ability to choose whether they're going to direct those funds to their local school or their district, or if they're going to go to the private sector to get services. That's the accountability that I would be looking for, not necessarily government to government. That just hasn't worked. Giving that money to parents and allowing them to hold people accountable for the results that they see in their student, ultimately, that's where I would like to see us go.
President Trump mentioned that one of the places that after he's done with USAID, that Elon Musk should go hunting for savings is the Department of Education. When he goes there and starts hunting around for savings and inefficiencies and waste, et cetera, what do you think he's going to find?
Well, Doge has already been in the Department of Education, and they've already rooted out a lot of waste related to DEI. I mean, over $1 billion just in the last year on race-based hiring, an equity-based summer camp, training programs for DEI. So there's already been a lot exposed and cut in the department just related to DEI and some of the president's executive orders. As far as waste, fraud, and abuse, I'll just give you an example. I've started several charter schools in Florida after serving on my local school board to try to increase options for families. A startup grant, which comes from the federal government, charter school startup grant, there have been times where we haven't received any funds for a startup grant into the second or third year of the charter school. So how is that a startup grant to help expand parent choice when you're not even getting the money until the third year the school is open? It just doesn't work.
If you send your kids to a charter school or to a parochial school, should the state be able to help out in your world? I mean, for example, when I was a kid, the local Catholic school used town buses, which I find fine because one way or another, that's not advancing an education. That's or a point of view. That's just getting them there. Are there resources that you think could be given to parochial schools, for example?
Well, my ideal educational infrastructure is that every dollar that is spent on education is parent directed. So if I were to have my way, every parent would have an education scholarship account, and sure, they could use that to go to their local public school and direct those dollars, but at least they would be making a conscious decision. I want my child to go to this public school. Otherwise, they could use it for tuition at a private school. But I think we think too binary about education. I would love to see more flexible and blended options where a student who needs a lot more help in math is in a small group environment, maybe a small tutoring environment to learn math, but maybe they're actually learning civics or reading on their own because they excel in that area. And parents can actually use those dollars in a more flexible way, depending on what the needs of their students are. I think that's where education is going in the next era of flexible education options that are parent directed and student centered.
So I know one of the talking points of the left is that when you talk about, dollars traveling with the students, is they always say, well, the rich people will send their kids to private schools or yank them, and then just the poor kids will get left in the public school system. Do you believe that that's true? And if not, why?
Well, I don't believe that's true necessarily because you look at a place like Miami-Dade County where 75% of parents are choosing a school that is outside of their zone public school. That is a majority minority county. Majority of students in Miami, English is not their first language, and majority low income. So many of those parents are making a choice to send their student outside of their zone public school. I think every parent, and including my own, and of course my husband is a great example of this as well, regardless of how much money or education that they have, they care about their children, and they're going to make the best choice that they can for their children's education when they have the agency to do so. So we do need to equip them with information and how to select the best option based on the information that they have. But we can't expect that just because they don't have money or they're not educated that they can't do so. I mean, look at Ben Carson's mom, right? She wasn't even literate and she was able to produce one of the greatest minds in America.
That's true. I feel like we talk about money, and there's this adage in Washington, and especially from folks on the left, that the more you spend, the more you'll get. But education doesn't seem to bear that out. We throw a ton of money at Washington, D.C. schools, and yet they continue to get failing grades. What is the metric like? But the left has defined this, that if you spend a lot of money, you care more than outcomes. So how do we and should we look at education?
Yeah, I always like to ask people when they say we should fully fund education, to tell me what that dollar amount is. Because what are they going to say? $50,000 a student? I mean, they would have to go well above what's spent in DC or New York, where they're still not getting good results. In Florida, we do an annual report on the performance of charter schools versus public schools. And historically, charter schools have been about 20 to 30% funded less than the traditional public schools, but they are outperforming the traditional public schools at every demographic, even the lowest income students, the most difficult students, students with disabilities. So all of those demographics are outperforming their public school counterparts, even with 20 to 30% less funding. So I would love to see education funded at higher levels. I want to pay teachers more and make it more competitive to be a teacher, for example. but it's not a money problem. We've been throwing money at this problem for decades. $190 billion was put in after COVID to combat learning loss. And we've seen that didn't work. Where did $190 billion go? I can tell you it did not go into helping students achieve academically, unfortunately. And so it's not about that. What it is about is free market competition, free market principles, innovation, entrepreneurship, coming into the education space and being welcomed there, where parents as consumers can make choices that are best for their children.
So is it like the unions that are the problem? I mean, is that what's called? I mean, that teachers can't teach or unions are putting shackles on them? I mean, look, what is it that's causing? I mean, because again, the evidence is clear, as you just laid out. The charter schools get less money, yet have a higher degree of success and scores. So what is it that's holding public schools back?
Unions are a major issue, and they're part of the reason why I believe that teachers are not paid what they deserve, or at least good teachers are not paid what they deserve, because what unions do is bring everyone down to the lowest common denominator, and they protect bad teachers from being fired. And so that's one of the issues. But as I mentioned, I'll just go back to my previous comments. Any organization, any industry that operates as a monopoly, as the public school system has, is not going to serve their clientele well. We don't accept it in any other industry and expect that it's going to be good. I mean, remember when Comcast was the only way that you could get cable or internet, and how horrible it was notoriously until it started to get some competition. In the school and education space, we need free market competition to lift all of the boats. We've seen it happen where there are areas of our country where there's more parental choice. The students that are in the public schools, remaining in the public schools, as you alluded to earlier, actually perform better as well as the students that are making an alternative choice. And so it really comes down to that first principle. The root of the problem is the monopoly, not who controls the monopoly or the fact that unions are operating within the monopoly necessarily, because the free market will take care of those issues. The root problem is the monopoly itself.
How big of a factor like COVID? What I worry about is this next generation and what COVID did in terms of like just reading alone, the setbacks that occurred to young kids being able to get the education at a critical phase. Like, how much is that going to set back this generation?
Well, COVID just amplified the problems that were already existing in the schools. Reading is a major issue. You know, the podcast series Sold a Story really exposed the problems with reading programs that are not research-based, that are not phonics-based, and actually proven over time in history to help students to succeed in reading and comprehend reading over the long term. And unfortunately, the monopoly system has not made adjustments to their reading portfolio and their pedagogy to follow what is research-based and completely phonics-based. So what happens when you have COVID and you have a time when it can no longer be hidden behind the closed doors of the school? Parents started to see, well, wait a second, they're actually not reading here. You know, there's a facade of what's happening, and the students are out of school for an extended period of time. So they don't get that repetition and they don't have the foundation for reading. It really just exacerbated the bad curriculum, the curriculum crisis that we have in this country that wasn't teaching kids to read proficiently in the first place.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm so excited because I think this happens piece by piece, right? Meaning that when you guys go down, when your husband's governor and your first lady, you guys can really make Florida a model of all the things that you're talking about, because you have the background and the expertise to actually execute on so many of these issues. And I think what happens is that will infect other states. They will look and say, do you see what the Donalds are doing in Florida? We should do that in, South Dakota or, Kentucky, or wherever. I think that you guys can become this incubator about how to do education right. And that will infect so many of these other states who've tried to figure out, maybe don't have the same ability to show how charter schools or freeing people of the unions, et cetera, could work. So I'm excited about what you guys are going to do in Florida.
Well, Sean, that's another reason why I've been working with America First Policy Institute as the chair of their Center for Education Opportunity, so that we can take the wins that we had here in Florida when it comes to education and share those with the rest of the country, share those lessons with the federal government to help get President Trump's education agenda across as well. Because, yeah, Florida is a leader. We've been a leader in school choice for decades now. And we do want to share that success with the rest of the country because we really need to save this country. And we can't do it without a great education system.
Totally agree. Erika Donalds, thank you for joining us today. I wish you and your husband all the best on the campaign trail and look forward to checking back in with you on what you guys are doing both at AFPI and then eventually in Florida to make education great again.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. I appreciate it.
You bet. Wow, two amazing conversations. I'm so excited. By the way, panel discussion tomorrow, big insight into Trump world on Friday. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. I've got a great newsletter coming out, SeanSpicer.com on Friday as well. Yesterday's was a must read as well. Go sign up. It's free. But on Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, I'm hosting a Zoom call because in my wellness journey, I've realized that there's a lot of companies that are actually MAHA approved, that are on the forefront of affordable, healthier, all natural. It's amazing. If you actually want to hear about some of these products, household products, personal care products, I've switched all over to them. They're more natural, more effective, and more affordable. It's a family-owned American business. I love doing business with these guys, and I'm going to tell you how I got involved and how you can too. Space is limited, so RSVP now by texting the word invite to 276-500-1185. Text invite to 500-1185. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.